Hello and welcome to our first lecture in Biology 160, Introduction to Anatomy and Physiology. This will be the first recorded lecture that we'll have for this semester. And as we go through these lectures, I'm assuming that you've already read the material, read the book for this chapter, for this information that we're going to be going over today. And in the recorded lectures, what we'll be doing is spending a little bit more time making sure that you understand some key concepts, be able to point out the things that I want you to know, some things to think about as we go through this recorded lecture. Remember, if you have any questions at any time, you can get a hold of me by email. I'd be happy to answer your questions. In this first lecture today, we're going to be first looking at the definition of anatomy and physiology. What exactly is it that we're going to be studying this semester for these 16 weeks? We're going to look at an overview of the organ systems in the body as well as organization of living things and the functions of living things. Then we'll get into the terminology in anatomy and physiology, and what you'll find is one of the major things that students may find difficult in whenever you're studying a biology subject, and anatomy and physiology is part of biology, is the terminology. It's like you're learning a new language with all the new terms. And so in today's lecture we'll take some time and look at some of those terms and help you get familiar with some of the terms and point you in the right direction so you can start studying some of these terms so you can be successful in this anatomy and physiology class. So first of all, what exactly is anatomy and physiology? As you can see here, anatomy, if you were to define anatomy, it's the study of the structure and the shape of the body and its parts. Physiology, on the other hand, is the study of how the body and those parts work or function. That is a working definition, but what exactly does that mean? Well, for example, in one of our later lectures, we'll be talking about the heart. And here's a picture of the heart when we're talking about the anatomy of the heart. Remember that the anatomy is the parts, shape, and structure of the heart. And you can see here, all the parts of the heart are labeled. This is the anatomy of the heart. This would be where you're memorizing all the names of the different parts of the heart. And again, we have a lot of new terms coming up here. These are some of the things we're going to study when we get later into the cardiovascular system. You can see the shape of the heart. And you can see the different parts, the different vessels and things that are coming off the heart. All of that is going to be part of the anatomy of the heart. Physiology of the heart, on the other hand, when we come back to this picture here, for example, one of the functions of the heart now, so physiology is a function of the heart. One of the functions of the heart is contractions, being able to pump the blood around the body. And here we're looking at the impulse system, the mechanism that causes the heart to pump and keeps everything pumping in the same rhythm. And again, we'll talk about this later in this semester, but this would be the physiology of the heart. Anatomy and physiology, they're separate, they have separate definitions, but they're very interconnected. So in this class, we'll be talking about both anatomy and physiology, depending on where you go to school and what college or university you go to. Sometimes they have anatomy and physiology together. Other places they may have separate courses, but they connect together. You can't really study anatomy without studying the physiology and vice versa. And another thing you'll find as we go through this course is that the anatomy, or the structure, the shape, determines the function. So something may have a certain shape because of how it functions, and this is true for the heart as well. As you look at the heart, as we're looking at these different chambers, we have the ventricles, the atria. Those shapes allow the heart to carry out its function of pumping the blood. So anatomy and physiology is interconnected in that way. We can then go on, and in anatomy we can split it up even a little bit more. We have what's called the gross anatomy, and we also have the microscopic anatomy. We're talking about the gross anatomy here. The gross anatomy, gross means large, not disgusting, but it means large in this case. And so when we're looking at the gross anatomy, this is what we can see with our eyes. So when we're dissecting a cadaver, when you're dissecting a fetal pig later in this semester, you'll be looking at the gross anatomy. Here we have the digestive system. You can see here the different organs. We've got our liver here. We've got our large and small intestine here. We've got our stomach. the esophagus, all of this is the gross anatomy you can see. We also have what's called the microscopic anatomy. The microscopic anatomy, we're looking at things that can't be seen with the naked eye. This is where you'll need a microscope in order to see these things. And this is also an important part of anatomy. In this case, we have the cells. So this is looking at the microscopic anatomy of the stomach, which is part of the digestive system. And here we're looking at the cells in the lining of the stomach that have a certain function to allow the stomach to carry out its overall function, which is the beginning of digestion. So we have these cells within the folds of the stomach that are producing hydrochloric acid or producing mucus or producing pepsinogen that will become pepsin that allow the stomach to carry out its function. So again, these things are interconnected. The gross anatomy and the microscopic anatomy are connected together as we look at the different parts of the body. That is the definition of anatomy and physiology, and as we move through each system in the body, we'll be taking time looking at both the anatomy but then also the physiology of the different systems. What we're going to do now is look at the levels of structural organization. One of the key attributes of living things is that they are organized. That's one of the ways you can tell a living thing from a non-living thing, is that organization. This organization comes in different levels. So as you look at a living thing, you can break it down into smaller and smaller parts, and each of these parts, these smaller parts, come together, build together to make the next level of organization. The most basic level of organization in a living thing is the chemicals. It's a chemical level made up of atoms and molecules that come together to form the larger levels. Every living thing is made of atoms, and these atoms also have a smaller level. You can break these atoms down into subatomic particles. We'll talk about subatomic particles in our next lecture, next series of lectures, in the next section. And these subatomic particles, these be things like protons, neutrons, electrons. Hopefully you've heard of those things before. Things you learn about in chemistry class. Chemistry is an integral part of biology. They go together. And so you'll find that if you're going to study biology, you also are studying chemistry. And you'll see as we go through this semester, we're also going to take time and talk about chemistry. These atoms then form together to form molecules. Molecules are groups of atoms. These molecules can be either what we call organic or inorganic molecules, and we'll also take some time and talk about those. But fundamentally, organic molecules, those are the molecules of living things. These are large molecules, things like proteins, lipids, carbohydrates, things that are used to build living things. And in general, organic molecules are going to be more complex than inorganic molecules or non-living molecules. So we have the chemical level, we have atoms, and we have molecules. And then the next level is the cellular level. This is when we actually start talking about what we consider a living thing. So all living things are made of atoms and molecules, but not until those molecules form into some sort of cell does that mass of molecules become a living thing. So cells are the fundamental level of living things. Cells can come together to form what we call tissues. We're going to study the tissues in the human body. There's a number of different tissues, and basically what a tissue is it's a group of cells that carry out a similar function and have a similar structure that work together. The next level after tissues is the organ level. You're familiar with organs, I'm sure. Stomach, heart, different things like that. Those all be considered organs. Something to point out here is that, again, we have the organ is made up of different tissues. So this is the next level organization, which means that it's being built of the lower level. So different tissues come together to form these organs. And each organ in our body is made up of a variety of tissues. So each organ, there's not just one tissue makes an organ, so many different tissues come together to form this organ. You can see here in this blood vessel, we have epithelial tissue, we have muscle tissue, we have connective tissue, there's also nervous tissue. All these different tissues are coming together in order to form this organ. Next on our list, next in the level of organization, we have organ systems. So different organs come together to form large systems. This is what we're going to be looking at in this class as we go through each of the chapters in the book. Basically, each chapter is looking at a different organ system. We'll look at the digestive system. Digestive system, we have a number of organs that are coming together to form this digestive system. Then finally, we have the whole organism. This is the largest level of organization. So the whole organism comes together to form, is built of these lower levels. So in our body, we have different organ systems, which are built of organs, which are made up of tissues, which are made of cells, which are made of molecules, which are made of atoms, and then subatomic particles. So you can see how these build on each other. But then also notice that as we move from one level to the next level, we're moving up in complexity as well. So the atoms are the simplest, smallest structure of a living thing. And then we build those more complex, become more complex as we build molecules, and then cells, which is the fundamental level of a living thing, etc., up to the whole organismal level. Another thing to maybe point out at this point is that depending on the living thing you're talking about, you may or may not have all of these different levels. And what I mean by that is all living things don't have what we'd call the organismal level, this complex level here that we talk about at the top here, the highest level of organization. We are going to focus on the human body, which does have this organismal level, but a lot of other living things don't have this high level here. If you're thinking about living things in general, most of the things that come to mind, first of all, such as pets, your dogs, your cats, things like that, they're also complex organisms. But other living things, such as bacteria, yeast, things like that, they only have the cellular level. In fact, most of the living things on Earth only have this cellular level. That's their most complex level of organization. Other living things have tissues, organs, organ systems, and move up to higher levels.